Thank you, Rick. The meeting's live now.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to May 9th meeting of Council. We have two planning matters today, an informal and a formal meeting. So first up is the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for, oh shoot, right, roll call first, my bad. Okay, can we start with Ward 1?
Good evening, Councillor Hanmer present.
Councillor Bodley present.
Councillor Veith present. Councillor Freeman present.
Councillor Henry present.
Councillor Bonago present.
Mayor Jaworski here.
Okay, great, thanks. Councillor Bassick here too. All right, so first is an informal public.
Sorry, can we do a declaration of pecuniary interest?
Oh, yes, sorry, and also any declarations of pecuniary interest.
Through you, Chair Bassick, it's Councillor Freeman here. I will be declaring a pecuniary interest as it relates to official plan amendment number 36 and zoning bylaw amendment Z2205. Oh, sorry, it's the other one. It's the one for Herb Street.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, related to my place of business.
Excellent. Okay, great. Okay. No, my fault. Okay, so informal public meeting for official plan amendment number 36 and zoning bylaw amendment Z2205 for 81 and 85 Bridgeport Road East. So I'm going to read the procedure for electronic informal public meetings. Informal planning meeting item 11A, official plan amendment number 36 and zoning bylaw amendment Z2205, 81, 85 Bridgeport Road, Inc., 81 and 85 Bridgeport Road East. So this is an informal meeting to consider item 11A, which I just outlined above. There will be no decisions made tonight. Council and the public are seeing this application for the first time. Council is looking for feedback from interested parties with respect to this application Tonight's comments will be taken into consideration in developing a staff position on this application, and a staff report will be considered by council during a formal public meeting at a future meeting. Anybody who wants further notice of this application, including the formal public meeting and passage of any bylaw, should contact the planner, Max Kerrigan, at 519-747-8522 or at max.kerrigan@waterloo.ca, spelled as max.kerrigan@waterloo.ca. If you would like to speak at the meeting, please call the clerk's office at 519-747-8705. The planner, Max Kerrigan, will now provide a brief overview of the application.
Sorry, through you, Councillor Vassich, it's Councillor Freeman again. I'm sorry, I do have a pecuniary interest where this is concerned as well. I had looked up the other one on my company website and I just checked this one too. So my apologies, I will step back from the call.
Okay, thanks for checking.
Good evening.
All right, Max.
Hi, thank you, Councillor Chair Vasic. Good evening, members of council, city staff, and members of the public. My name is Max Kerrigan, and tonight's informal public meeting is for Official Plan Amendment 36, Zoning Bylaw Amendment Z2205 for lands located at 81 and 85 Bridgeport Road East. The application was submitted by 8185 Bridgeport Incorporated, represented here tonight by Trevor Hawkins of MHBC Planning and Ashley Crofts of ABA Architects, who will be co-presenting on behalf of the applicant, following my general overview. Next slide, please. The subject site's located on the south side of Bridgeport Road East, mid-block between Weber Street North and Devitt Avenue North. It's located directly across from the Bridgeport Plaza and approximately 200 meters from King Street in the Uptown to the west. Next slide, please. The site was most recently occupied by Big Bill's Comfort Plus Furniture at 85 Bridgeport on the left of those images, and used car sales at 81 Bridgeport. Next slide, please. Here you can see how the two parcels make up the subject lands, which total 0.97 of a hectare with 87 meters of street frontage on Bridgeport Road East. You can also see how the subject site sits within its immediate context. Next slide. Next slide, please. This immediate context consists of commercial retail and office to the east, vacant commercial lands to the west, Bridgeport Plaza to the north, and a mix of single-family and three-story walk-up apartments to the south and to the west. Next slide, please. The applicant is proposing to redevelop the site with 3 towers upon a shared podium. The towers transition in height from 22 stories for Tower A, fronting on Bridgeport, to 19 stories for Tower B to the west, and 16 stories for Tower C at the south of the site. Commercial is proposed fronting on Bridgeport, and parking is underground and within the podium. Next slide, please. This site plan provides a better sense of how the towers are situated upon the site, with a mutual driveway that loops beneath the shared podium. Amenity areas are proposed at grade and upon the podium. Next slide, please. With respect to the policy framework, the official plan designates the subject lands as mixed-use community commercial. The lands designated mixed-use community commercial are commercial centers or areas that serve as commercial focal points or destinations for the surrounding community. Residential uses may be permitted in stories above the ground floor within multi-story mixed-use buildings. The subject lands are also located within a major node, which follows the same delineation that is indicated by the red on this plan. Major nodes are planned as medium-high to high-density mixed-use areas that accommodate a range of uses, which may include residential, commercial, employment, social, cultural, recreational, and institutional uses. With respect to the permitted height and density in the OP, the subject lands is designated medium-high density, which contemplates heights of 40 meters or 12 stories, and a maximum density of 600 bedrooms per hectare. In addition, as indicated by the curvy blue line that runs across the plan, the subject lands are partially within the Laurel Clare floodplain special policy area. As per the provincial policy statement, any change or modification to the official plan policies, land use designations, or boundaries applying to special policy area lands must be approved by the Ministers of Municipal Affairs and Housing and Natural Resources and Forestry prior to the approval authority approving such changes or modifications. As an OPA is proposed to change the height and density limits on the lands, these changes would constitute a change or modification under the aforementioned PPS policy. It will have to be demonstrated in the submission materials that this proposal follows provincial procedures in this regard. Next slide, please. With respect to the existing zoning on site, the subject lands are zoned mixed-use community commercial 40, which permits a range of commercial uses, as well as residential units within a mixed-use building above the ground floor up to 40 meters or 12 stories in height, and a maximum density of 600 bedrooms per hectare. Site-specific provision 47 also applies to the subject lands, whereby site exceptions apply to the area indicated as Area B in this plan. Exceptions include the permissions for a multi-unit residential building on the rear portion of the subject lands, as well as restrictions on surface parking to a maximum of 20%. Next slide, please. In order to implement the proposed development, the applicant is requesting to redesignate the lands from medium-high density, 40 meters, to high density, 81 meters, to accommodate heights above the permitted 12 stories. In order to implement the requested official plan amendment, a zoning bylaw amendment is proposed to rezone the lands to C181 at the north and C160 to the south. The lands within the floodplain special policy area are not proposed to change and will remain zoned C140. In addition, the applicant is seeking three site-specific provisions, which are an increased maximum horizontal tower dimension for Tower B from 40 meters to 51 meters, a reduced residential parking rate from 1 to 0.9 spaces per unit, and a reduced non-residential parking rate of 2.4 spaces per 100 meters squared of building floor area. This is a proposed reduction of 56 total spaces from 564 to 508. Next slide, please. The applicant has submitted various plans, reports, and studies as part of their application, which have been circulated to internal staff and review agencies. This information has also been posted on the city website under the zone change applications webpage. The reports are currently under review. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of next steps, staff will complete a review of the submitted reports and plans. I will consider any feedback received from the public, commenting agencies, city staff, and of course, council. I will then assess whether the requested amendments and site-specific zoning provisions constitute good planning, after which a staff report will be prepared with recommendations to council. We will then hold a formal public meeting at a future date to be determined, at which point council will make a final decision on the proposed OPA and ZBA. That concludes my presentation. I'm now available for questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Max. Does any councillor have any questions for staff? Please remember this is an informal public meeting and only questions of clarification may be asked. Council members should not express opinions at this point. Okay, I see three questions so far. Mayor Jaworski.
Thank you very much, Max, through the chair. I was just wondering about the zoning of the adjacent properties. You gave an overview of it, and I was just thinking about our nodes and corridors planning methodology dating back to around 2005, and we try and keep everything at nodes, particularly of substantial height. And I would note that these seem to be, I would consider, substantial height, yet doesn't seem to be at a node. I'm just wondering what sort of the adjacent properties on that stretch are. I realize there's a two to the east of it, and then a couple around it with, I think you said 3 stories around there.
Sure. Through you, Chair Vasic, to Mayor Jaworski. Are you particularly, are you looking for the zones of the properties to the east, or just generally? Because they sort of range. There's, as you can see, RMU 20 along Devitt and Herb, and then C181 to the east, and C140 at Herb and Weber. Now, all the red property that you can see here is considered part of the major node. And
Okay.
the heights generally decrease from the node itself, the intersection, down towards the orange uses and then to the yellow uses to the south. So it's sort of it's an easy transition is the idea, but this property is located within the major node.
Okay, that is very helpful, Max. I just couldn't read what was on the screen, not without glasses. Thank you very much. I'll turn it back to the chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Jaworski. Next up is Councillor Bonagor.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Vasic. Max, thanks for all this information. So the location that we're discussing here, it was designated medium-high rise in the official plan in the nodes and corridors, as you said, just to kind of help provide a transition. And I know from other discussions we've been having at council that, medium height buildings really do fill a much needed gap in the housing landscape. So given that, this is kind of the situation that we have, and then when an application like this comes in, is height transitioning, is that something that is evaluated by staff through the review process?
Through you, Chair Vasic, to Councillor Bonagor. Certainly through the review process, we look at all matters related to grade, related to shadows, related to existing built form and proximity. We look at wind impact, overlook all these matters. So every site has its individual merits and or complications, issues, what have you. And through every application, we look at that specific site with the intention of the zoning that's applied, and then we assess it accordingly. I hope that answers your question.
It sounds like it does. So basically, it's one of the things that would be considered as you assess the application, just as you would on every application. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Great. Okay, the other question that I have right now is I'm just looking at the number of parking spaces that are being proposed, and it's a shared driveway that crosses the sidewalk on a busy street in two places. Just kind of casting ahead to the sort of conflicts that might create. Are there ways to minimize the potential conflict between vehicles entering and exiting the property and pedestrians on that street? And is that also something that would be part of the review process?
Through you, Chair Vasic, to Councillor Bonagor once again. Yes, 100%. There's visibility triangles that would have to be applied. And through site plan, we would ensure, pedestrian right of way is kind of the primary right of way. Vehicles would have to be able to navigate with clear visibility of potential pedestrians. In this case, also there's a one-way street. Now, I haven't reviewed this in any great detail, but certainly through a deeper dive into the details and reports submitted, all matters to do with safety and volumes interacting, conflicted uses of pedestrians and cyclists and cars would certainly be part of our review.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. That's all from me for staff. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Sorry, I kind of forgot I was the chair for a second. Okay, next up is Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Chair Vasic. Max, I think this is certainly interesting. Let me start with a small detail. I note among the studies that were submitted and therefore I presume were required, there was not sort of a transportation impact required. I assume that's because the site sort of fronts onto a regional road and the region doesn't require such a study given it's a major arterial. But I note the applicant's submission highlights that certainly they expect a lot of vehicle travel to pass through David Avenue if it's heading for points east. I'd submit if it's also heading for points south, that would be a logical path of travel as well. So I'm curious to what extent those are matters that that we'd look into or consider, or whether there'd be any sort of consideration, given to the folks on DeWitt for the additional traffic flow. I mean, clearly they already deal with some traffic flow of folks trying to make those different movements, given the plaza is a significant destination and would draw people along DeWitt to sort of get to and from the western edge of that already. But I'm curious how that factors in, given transportation impact study hasn't been required as part of this development.
Through you, Chair Vasic, to Councillor Henry. You are correct in your assumptions that it was not requested as it is in a regional road. It was relayed to the applicant through the pre-con process to certainly hone in on matters related to transportation and potential impact through their justification. As I mentioned, I haven't dug into it yet, so I don't know how in depth they get there, but I certainly hope they will be looking at those matters. Additionally, yeah, certainly we're dealing with a site with 2 one-way streets on either side, so transportation flow is certainly unique, and these concerns from residents and you bring it up now, it's certainly on my radar through my review, so it will be a matter that will definitely be part of the review.
I appreciate that. Picking up on the mayor's sort of question around the node and transitions, and the ward councillor who also was asking about that. In effect, how I understand the applicant's large big request. There's a bunch of small requests, but the big request is to grow the middle of the node out, right? I mean, yes, it's in the node, but we transition down from sort of the intersection in particular ways, but in effect they're trying to grow the big part out a little wider, and then have it still transition down across their sites, and that's something that we're going to need to evaluate. One of the arguments that they make in their planning justification report, and I'm sure that we're going to hear from Mr. Hawkins, is that well, the city did this nodes and corridors piece. It's got lots of places for sort of the high density kinds of lands identified, particularly in the urban growth center, and I'd suggest even in this node, but that those are encumbered significantly by floodplain issues, and we saw that on the map here, including a large part of the plaza, including the entirety of the lands between this site and DeWitt fronting on Bridgeport, and some of the ones downwards on DeWitt. And their argument seems to be, well, you can't really develop those lands, so therefore you need more high density, and therefore it should be on my client's lands. And that's effectively the argument. I'm wondering how we sort of approach or think about those arguments, and how we've sort of assigned the balance in these sort of nodes for high density, because it is true that a large portion of that plaza is in the floodplain. Other lands on Bridgeport that are zoned for some density are in the floodplain, and conversely, some of the lands that ostensibly are planned to be sort of 6 stories RMU 20 on DeWitt, that these transition down to are in the floodplain, and without long consolidations aren't really going to be developable beyond what's already there. And so I think there's an argument in one direction, and from the floodplain, I would see an argument in the other direction as well in terms of transition in the floodplain. So I just wonder how, what range of these sort of considerations are going to go into the questions staff are asking as they as you look at as you look at the request and come forward with recommendations.
Sure. Through you, Chair Vasic, to Councillor Henry. These are big questions and big matters that the city staff are facing all the time. I don't have the answer for you today, but it's certainly work with growth and looking at where development potential exists, where it's happening, where pressure for more is being proposed, floodplain issues, obviously. At the forefront of that is we've got a floodplain running through our urban growth center. So these are all matters that certainly bigger conversations. And as I said, I don't have the answer for you today, but they do certainly, they are matters that are being discussed at a higher level. And our OPA, our official plan update is underway. So these are also, included in those bigger, further reaching conversations as well.
Nice, appreciate that. One other query, I don't remember if you said it during your presentation. What is site exception 47?
So I can't speak to the genesis of it. I was trying to figure that out, but it's with respect to high density residential being permitted in the area B that's noted on this plan, as well as a limit on the surface parking to 20%. I'm speculating, but I imagine it has to do with a residential use being permitted as the primary use on this portion of the site within the corridor commercial zone. Exactly.
That makes some sense. I just didn't know what 47 was, and I hadn't looked it up. So,
Okay.
All right, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Vest.
All right, thanks, Councillor Henry. Up next is Councillor Bodley.
Thank you, through you, Chair Bassick. Just to tie into Councillor Henry's question there, you kind of touched on this, but maybe I'll look for further clarification. So the OP designates the entire property or the two properties fully at C140, but the zoning has the sort of southern half there, southeastern half there, with the site-specific provision. Do we have? You mentioned that you were sort of digging into it, but you didn't have any understanding of the genesis. Do we know anything about why that was deemed under our zoning framework, but not our OP, to maybe not be a place for higher density residential?
For you, Councillor Chair Vasic, to Councillor Bodley. I'll have to circle back on that. And I may be misunderstanding your question, because higher density or medium to high density residential is permitted on the whole property. But the area B is more specifically to do with a permitted use that wouldn't be permitted. Again,
Sorry,
yeah.
Maybe I'm misunderstanding. I thought you had noted that it was that one of the permitted uses was multi-unit residential. Maybe I misunderstood that.
Yeah, so this site-specific exception says for area B that multi-unit residential is permitted on that portion of the property, but it is in fact permitted across the property. So it is rather confusing, and I don't actually have the answer as to what, as I mentioned, the genesis of that. So it is rather confusing, and I apologize. But I can circle back with those specific answers for you once I dig into it a little bit more.
No, appreciate that. Thank you for that. Like I say, sounds like maybe I was a bit confused on that. My second question is understanding, and again, sort of taking off Councillor Henry's first question, understanding that Bridgeport Road is a regional road. Do we know if there are any, from a regional transportation network perspective, any thoughts or plans in the future for there to be segregated cycling infrastructure on this road, particularly I feel as connects to the Laurel Trail, and maybe just bigger picture around that? Are there any right-of-way concerns from a regional perspective that we should be aware of when looking at this application?
Through Chair Vasic to Councillor Bodley, I'm not familiar with the regional intentions or the cycling master plan at this stage, but I can certainly, that will be part of my review, and I haven't received comments yet from the region, so they may very well be addressing that in their comments, but I don't have an answer for you today.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Are you done, Councillor Bodley?
Very much so.
Okay. Okay, I do have a question for you, Max. And I'm just curious, given the site's so close to amenities uptown and green space like at Moses Springer, not too far from Mary Allen, there's going to be, there's now parkland space at Margaret and Bridgeport that will hopefully be activated over the next number of years. Would it be reasonable or appropriate for this site to be considered for further parking relief or a shared parking model?
Through you, or to you, Chair Vasic. That may be something that through the review we consider as justified. But I can't recommend or deny that as a possibility at this stage. But certainly something that will come and be considered through a review.
For sure, thanks. And not an opinion of mine. It's just I'm trying to wrap my head around parking and lots of conversations kind of publicly around parking and including in our, our neighbor to our south. So I was just curious a little bit more about that. Thanks, Max. Any other questions of staff? Okay, if you would like, if anyone listening would like to speak at the meeting, please call the clerk's office at 519-747-8705, 519-747-8705. I will now call upon the registered delegations. We have two of them. First up is Trevor Hawkins, partner at NHBC, who has 10 minutes. Welcome. With Ashley, I believe. Oh, you're speaking with Ashley. Okay, great. Well, Trevor, Ashley, welcome.
Thank you, Chair Vasic. There we go. Good evening, Mayor Jaworski, members of council, staff. Thanks, Max, for an excellent overview presentation. Ashley Crofts from AB Architects is here with me this evening, and we'll be tag teaming, so we'll pass the baton back and forth, and I'll start off. As Max noted, the property is 81 and 85 Bridgeport Road East. Next slide. So this slide gives a bit of context, sort of looking a bit beyond some of the images that Max was able to show in his presentation. We have the Bridgeport Plaza across the street on the other side of Bridgeport. We have the uptown further to the west with some mix of commercial and employment uses and residential uses. Elizabeth Ziegler School, public school, to the south within a short walk of this property. We have parks, we have the Moses Springer facility, the French elementary school on Lincoln with frontage on Bridgeport. So there's a number of complementary and supportive uses in the immediate area. There's the Laurel Trail, which connects with the Spurline Trail just southwest of this property. There's transit routes along Bridgeport, along Weber, along Herb Street, and of course the uptown and all of the other transit opportunities that are available in the uptown are a short walk away. Next slide. So Max gave a bit of an overview. So the site plan in front of council shows the podium with the three towers situated, with the tallest tower on the northeast part of the site, closest to the properties already zoned for high density, transitioning to a lower height at the south end. We have two accesses. One is in the floodplain on the northwesterly portion of the property, and one is entirely outside the floodplain on the northeasterly part of the property. The parking is all within a structure. There's commercial uses in the podium facing Bridgeport, with residential units also in the podium above the first floor. So the parking would be hidden behind residential units that face Bridgeport. So the parking, in a sense, would all be tucked inside the project. In total, 494 dwelling units, 692 beds. So there's a mixture of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, as well as bike parking, shared outdoor amenity space, both at grade and on the podium. And all of the units will have balconies. So the two podium, or the two amenity areas at grade, there's one in a little plaza and a little nook, sort of where the driveway entrance is on the northwest part of the site. And then there's an amenity area sort of just to the west of Tower C. Next slide. And Ashley's going to give a bit of an overview now of the building design.
Great, thanks so much, Trevor. So further to the typical tower on podium model, the development is designed with an increased number of discrete volumes to decrease the overall perception of scale. So as shown in the diagram on screen, the massing is compartmentalized into 4 distinct components. We have the upper tower, the main tower below, the upper podium below that, and the lower podium at the bottom. These components are inserted and connected to one another to create one cohesive, compact urban form. Next slide, please. This is a view looking southwest along Bridgeport Road with the Water Park Place towers in the background off to the right. Here you can see the distinct components further articulated and how they integrate with one another. Directing your attention to Bridgeport Road, notice how the towers are set back from the street and the lower podium is recessed to define a 2-story covered area. At grade, building entrances and commercial uses are provided to activate Bridgeport Road, accompanied by extensive glazing and a playful patterning of windows to ensure overlook and visual interest along the street. Next slide, please. So here we showcase a couple of inspiration images to illustrate some of the themes that we're exploring in the design of the development. So you can see contrast through various cladding window treatments and color, punched window patterns, and the insertion of volumes within other volumes. Next slide, please. So here's a view looking southeast along Bridgeport Road. The white upper podium frames the recessed pedestrian plaza at the bottom right of the image. A series of recessed balconies with contrasting materials and colors reduce the overall length of the street-facing facade into smaller sections. The street-facing tower facades feature curtain wall glazing with patterned operable windows for residents. Next slide, please. So here we have a floor plan, and this is of levels 3 to 5, and it showcases how the vehicular parking that Trevor mentioned in the upper podium floors is shielded from the public realm by residential units. So as you can see, we're including 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units to appeal to a broad demographic, including families. The angled wall on the exterior along Bridgeport, which is on the left of the screen, provides opportunity for a variation in the size of these units. So from a compact 1 bedroom near the top corner to a spacious 2 bedroom unit at the bottom corner. Next slide, please. And for this last rendering, we have a view looking north with the Lincoln Towers in the background and Bridgeport Plaza directly across the street from the development. Future tenants will benefit from the signal at Devitt Avenue for access on foot to Walmart and Sobeys for groceries, as well as additional necessities within a 5-minute walk, including a dentist, a vet, clinic, fitness center, pharmacy, hair salon, and barber shop. So from this perspective, you can also see how the variation in the building heights makes for an articulated skyline, with the lowest tower transitioning towards where lower heights are planned. You can also get a glimpse of the common terrace on the podium roof, which is designed for communal use and to incorporate, it also incorporates feedback story from the wind analysis that we had conducted. It's also worth mentioning that this is a shadow condition in September at 10 a.m. and that under no circumstances are there shadow impacts on the surrounding residential uses. And at this point, I'll pass it back over to Trevor. Thanks.
Next slide, please. So we touched on this during Max's presentation and a number of questions from members of council. The property is within a major node, which is an area planned for intensification. It's designated mixed-use community commercial, which permits mixed-use buildings. A portion of the site is within the special policy area related to the floodplain. There's no increase in height or density proposed as part of this request within the floodplain area. And we've already received comments from the GRCA with regard to the project expressing no concerns. The official plan amendment is to Schedule B1, which is the schedule on the screen. And the request is to go from medium high density to high density. And as we can see on this slide, there's a number of properties around it, including the property immediately to the east that is designated high density already, property across the street, the whole plaza. is designated high density. And then the remainder of the surrounding lands are medium high or medium density. There's no lands immediately abutting this parcel that are designated low density residential. Next slide. In terms of the zoning bylaw, the lands are zoned C140, which is the mixed use community commercial zone. It permits residential and commercial unit uses, residential above the ground floor. And the site-specific 47, which was the subject of some of the questions this evening, I believe the purpose of that, it dates back to the mid-1990s, but the purpose was to allow a residential only building on the sort of southerly portion of this parcel. That was the main reason for that site-specific. The request would rezone this parcel in 3 zones. It would keep the C140 zoning for the portion of the site within the floodplain, so no change there. It would zone the southerly portion C160, and it would zone the sort of northeasterly portion of the site C181, sort of phase 2, except for the floodplain lands on the site plan that we showed earlier. The surrounding lands are either zone C181, which is the lands to the east, C120, which are the lands at the corner of Devitt and Bridgeport, C160, which are the lands immediately to the north, or RMU20, which are the lands along the rest of Devitt and along Herb Street. And as we can see, there's quite a range of zones in the node. There's RMU60, RMU20, C160, RMU60 over by Lincoln, RMU81 by Lincoln, and we see that there's a wide range of transitions. So the plaza, for example, being C160 with R8 on the other side of the creek in behind it, and then RMU60 next to the plaza with R8 zoning on the other side of the creek from it. So there are examples of other transitions in the area from a higher permission building to lands that are planned for less height. Next slide. So this table just walks through some of the regulations that are applicable in either the C140, 60, or 81 zone, and then corresponding what is proposed for the property. So the building meets all of the regulations that would be, or the buildings that would be applicable, except for Tower B, which is proposed to be 51 meters instead of 40. It's still less than the maximum tower footprint, so it's a narrower tower, and we've added a little bit extra length to the tower to allow for the larger units that we've discussed earlier. The tower meets all of the other regulations, including separation from the towers on the site, as well as from the neighboring properties. And the other site-specific relates to parking. So a decrease from 1 space per unit to 0.9 spaces per unit, and a decrease in the non-residential parking from 3.2 spaces per 100 square meters to 2.4 spaces per 100 square meters. And this property, as Ashley summarized, is located in a very walkable area. There's a number of uses that would serve day-to-day and week-to-week needs for anyone living in this building within a very short walk. There's a number of employers in the uptown that are within a short walk. There's active transportation trails, so the Laurel Trail is close by, which would connect to the Spurline Trail, and there's multiple transit routes in the immediate area within walking distance, as well as schools and parks. So it's an area that lends itself to not utilizing your vehicle on a day-to-day basis, and so we felt it was appropriate for a reduction in parking. Next slide. So as Max alluded to, we provided a number of supporting studies, including a noise study and a wind study, which helped guide our project. The wind assessment will work its way through the site plan process, particularly as it relates to the rooftop amenity space. There will be noise warning clauses required for the road noise associated with Bridgeport. There's no impacts on the surrounding properties as a result of this development, and there's no mitigation required as a result of any of the nearby commercial uses for this project. The lands have services along Bridgeport Road, municipal water, sanitary sewer and storm, and ABA's outlined an energy strategy with the objective of pursuing an energy efficient building. Next slide. So we feel that this property is ideally situated for a slight increase in density. It's well situated in terms of surrounding amenities, in terms of transit, in terms of alternative transportation, bike and walking. It does have access to the regional road network as well, if for vehicular use, with really 3 arterial roads within a very short distance: Bridgeport, Urban, Weber. With the surrounding lands all planned for medium high, or high density, there's an opportunity to appropriately transition to surrounding future development as well. Ashley and I would now be happy to answer any questions from council.
Thanks for the presentation, both of you. And I have a couple questions up already. First is Mayor Jaworski.
Thank you very much, through the chair, to Trevor and Ashley. Thank you very much for the presentation and the rendering of that. My first question, Trevor, is about the parking. I'm going to assume, since you're near the flood plain, that there are no below levels of parking. And moreover, how many levels of parking do you have above grade? I'm just looking to see how well it's accommodated.
Through you, Chair Vasic, to Mayor Jaworski, there's no below grade parking. And the podium itself is 6 stories. So there's parking sort of on levels 1 through 6 centralized to the building.
Thank you. Second question is perhaps to both of you. I'm trying to draw a comparison, Trevor, of what is allowed as of right for a building and what is proposed here. And I'm thinking about it from a pedestrian standpoint. So I'm walking down Bridgeport Road, and what do I see? I'm wondering how what is being requested here impacts what a pedestrian might see, or if it does. I'm thinking more of setbacks. Obviously, the design has been spoken about, but I'm really thinking about what the pedestrian view would be.
Through you, Chair Vasic, to Mayor Jaworski, I think the pedestrian experience along Bridgeport today is one of large surface parking lots. There's certainly a large surface parking lot across the street, and most of the uses on the south side of Bridgeport, including this property, have large surface parking lots, and there's several to the west or to the east of this property. And there is a purpose designed parking lot to the east of this property. So I don't know that if we visualize what's there today, then built form that's closer to the street would be far more pedestrian friendly than what would be experienced today.
Yeah.
But notwithstanding, yeah, I know, notwithstanding that, we have situated the towers a considerable distance from the property line. So the towers themselves, if we look at, if we could scroll back up to maybe to the site plans, which I think is slide 3, might be easier to answer the question and show you.
Was that all for you, Mayor Jaworski?
Julie, are you able to go back up to slide 3, Julie?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, she can't see page numbers, so could you just tell her when to stop?
It's the one that shows the site plan with keep going. A few more. One more, there we go. So this one shows the podium itself is, so there's a few things. There's a road widening required along Bridgeport. So the sort of extent of the road today will increase by 2.6 meters by virtue of the road widening. And then the podium itself is set back 5 meters, and the closest tower, which would be Tower A, is a further 5 meters. So about a little over 10 meters from the street, whereas Tower B is almost 28 meters from the street. So the towers are, positioned a considerable distance, or more than typical, from the street. And it's the podium really that helps frame the pedestrian experience. So we've got a fair bit of glazing and activity along the ground floor, which would be what the pedestrian would experience first. We've got the plaza entry point in the floodplain area. And then we have residential units facing Bridgeport. So there's quite a bit of activity and quite a bit of eyes on the street. And a lot of thoughts been put in by Ashley and the ABA team in terms of designing the site so that it does relate to the pedestrian experience.
Yeah, that was very helpful, Trevor. Thank you. Regarding the what is contemplated for the first floor? Would that be commercial necessarily, or is it still TBD by the development?
Yeah, certainly commercial. The right now the project has a little over 600 square meters, so 6,000 plus square feet. So there'd be opportunities for multiple units facing the street with multiple entries.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. And then just one last question. Ashley had shown a slice. I think it was slide 8 as Julie was scrolling by, a slice of the building that showed the different types of units that were in there in an area that had parking around it. And I'm just wondering if that is the type of selection of units that's contemplated throughout the floors, or is this just a sample floor that might not be representative of the other floors? I'm just thinking since it's a lot of parking on this one.
I think this is representative of the podium, so it demonstrates that the project has units around the perimeter and the parking is tucked inside. In terms of the towers themselves, will also have 1 and 2 bedroom units. So the 3 bedroom units are contained in the podium, along with 1s and 2s, and then the towers will have 1s and 2s as well.
Okay, thank you. Good clarity, and back to the chair.
Thanks. Next up is Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Chair Vasic, and thank you, Trevor, for the presentation. I'm just going to put, one of the questions I put to Max to you as well, and that's to sort of speak to the sort of transition piece. This is transition is one of those concepts that sounds very specific, very technical, and very clear. But of course, as you noted in your presentation, there are all sorts of different kinds of transitions and heights in different places. And so it is the concept of transition isn't exactly highly fungible or the output of a formula. It's something that we think through in various ways, and it certainly has nuance and debate that can be ascribed to it. So I wanted to put to you, you talked about what's going on to the north, what's going on to the east, what's going on to sort of the south and the southeast. Then you sort of skipped over the west, which admittedly is also RMU 20 theoretically in zoning, but as you've noted and seeing the floodplain runs through a whole lot of that space, and so the ability to reach safe access is difficult, and suggests that notwithstanding an RMU 20 zoning, the form and scale that we see today on a lot of David is probably going to continue to be the form and scale into the future based on those floodplain restrictions. So in that context, I was wondering if you could speak to your thoughts around what is appropriate transition, and how, in your view, we should and staff should be thinking about that aspect of this application.
For you, Chair Bassick, to Councillor Henry, and I know Ashley can jump in as well. I'll start off. The thought process for this project was to locate the tallest building in the northeast part of the site, which is adjacent to existing high density zoning and across the street from high density lands with 60 meter height permissions. Transition in terms of height to the south for the lands that are along Erb Street, which are planned and zoned for 6 stories and are certainly outside the floodplain. And then to offer physical separation as well as less height on the west side of the site. So the north, I guess the corner of Devitt and Bridgeport, the first 2 parcels are zoned commercial. So they will have now potential for commercial development in that location, notwithstanding the floodplain, if they can meet the commercial standards for safe access. And then there are a few properties to the south of that on each side of Devitt, as I'm looking at the GRCA mapping, that are within the floodplain. But there are a number of properties on Devitt heading towards Erb Street that are outside the floodplain and would have access to Erb Street or Devitt. And those are all planned for 6-story buildings. And in most cases, those sites along Devitt or Herb would be positioned, the buildings, when those sites ever redevelop. It's likely that those buildings would be positioned closer to the street with their parking in behind. So we felt that providing the tower separation from the 2 towers, the one on the south and the one on the east. With regard to the south, we have over 11 meters, plus they likely have parking in behind, and they're building closer to Herb Street, so there'd be a fair bit of separation, and our shadows wouldn't fall on those properties. And then with the properties to the west, we've got our own tower separation internal to the site, plus there's a driveway next to this property that leads in between our property and the properties on Devitt that leads to an apartment building that actually fronts onto Herb Street. So there's additional physical separation. And then again, we have shadows largely falling onto the commercial plaza across the street. And then as the sun moves to the west, the shadows fall across the commercial and large surface parking lots further to the east along Bridgeport. So we looked at shadows, we looked at building positioning, we looked at not creating a wall of towers along Bridgeport. We spaced the towers out, we staggered the towers in terms of their height, in terms of their positioning to create visual interest, to create a pedestrian experience along Bridgeport, and to be sensitive to the planned 6 or 12 or 25-story heights that surround this property.
Thanks, Trevor.
Is that it for you, Councillor Henry?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Bonagor.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Vasic. I've just got a few questions here for the developer. You're not the owner, though, so I understand. So it's going to be whether or not you can answer some of these, but let's jump in and see where it goes. First question, like if the owners were interested in developing a high-rise tower, why didn't they buy next door?
Through your Chair Vasic, I honestly can't answer that question. I think this is the property that they do own, and they wanted to explore what was possible on this site, and ABA and MHBC evaluated what was possible on the site and what could work. And as I outlined in my answer to Chair or to Councillor Henry, we felt this was an appropriate design and appropriate scale of project given this location, given all the surrounding supportive uses in the area, the walkability and transit, and just the proximity of the commercial uses is you can't get much closer than walking across the street to do all of your shopping. It's it was a main consideration, I'm sure, when they looked at this property.
Okay, yeah, to be fair, that's probably not one that you would have been able to answer anyway, but thank you, Trevor, for giving us the perspective that you could bring. Looking more broadly, I mean, housing is such a big discussion right across the country, right across the region, and particularly in urban Canadian cities, it's pretty widely acknowledged that we need more missing middle housing, which is kind of mid-rise development. It has a human scale. It's environmentally friendly to build, can be easier for fire services to handle, etc. People tell us they want them, but I'm just wondering, given that, why not pursue a development that's within zoning here?
Through you,
it's zoned, it's zoned for mid-rise. So did you explore what's possible within zoning?
Well, it's zoned for 40 meters or 12 stories. So certainly some of the challenges with a mid-rise building, which I interpreted you maybe meant a 6-story building or a 4 to 6-story building, is
sorry, no, I meant
No?
I meant the medium high, like I meant within zoning.
Okay.
So you're quite correct. 40 meters, 12 stories. That's so that's what I was asking about.
Yeah, some of the
whether you explored what was possible
Certainly.
within that zoning.
We did, and some of the challenges that present themselves when you look at that 40 zoning, whether it's C1 or RMU, and you layer in the tower footprint regulations, the horizontal dimensions, and the separation requirements, and the lower podium. It's very challenging to design the site and achieve some of the planned or already permitted densities. And in this case, the developer of this property was interested in a greater mix of 2-bedroom units and larger 2-bedroom units, and they wanted to introduce some 3-bedroom units. And under this framework, when you add bedrooms to your project, your density goes up. So in other places, in other communities that measure density differently, it's not the same, but in Waterloo, a 3-bedroom unit counts as 3 1-bedroom units in terms of how you measure density. So sometimes when a project wants to explore a greater range of bedroom or unit types that are going to appeal and supply housing for families and people who, for whatever reason, can't purchase a home in Vista Hills or in Beechwood or in Eastbridge, but they want to live somewhere where they don't have to use their car every day, and they want to live somewhere that's close to a school and close to parks and a community center and the uptown. This is the kind of housing that we need to provide more of, and this project, by including 2 and 3-bedroom units, it inevitably increases the bedroom per hectare density. So we kind of balanced a number of those overarching objectives and evaluated, like I said to Councillor Henry, some of the, if we did look at a taller building on this site, and where should it be, and what are some of the considerations that we wanted to explore, and this we felt was an appropriate scale of project for this location.
Okay. I might need just a bit more information on that. Sorry, I'm just trying to understand the part of what you were telling me there. So given how densities are calculated, does that mean that if it was entirely 2 and 3-bedroom units, it wouldn't need to be as tall? Sorry, I'm just really confused by that. So I'm hoping if you can help me out here.
Well, I think you're right. I think the not necessarily as tall, because the units would still be large and they would take up volume. I think what you were asking was, if you built 12-story buildings on this site, did you look at that? And we did, and it results in less density than what's permitted today, just because of all of those regulations when they get layered in, and the need to provide parking in a structure, and the separation between the towers.
Okay, sorry, I just accidentally muted myself as I responded. All right, so next point. I mean, you're rightly pointing out that the proximity of this site to trails and supermarkets, and particularly schools, so it's in a great location, but the floor plans show a lot of 1-bedrooms, including some very small ones. There's a few 3-beds, which is interesting. We haven't seen many of those come forward, so it's interesting to see that in the mix. But I'm just curious that it still seems to be, particularly in the towers themselves, very much largely ones with some 2s. That will meet need for sure. Will meet some of the need, but there is research that shows, and I hear a lot of resident feedback that tells me people are looking for different sizes of apartments. And if this is being promoted as being close to schools, there aren't that many apartments in here that would lend themselves to a family who might want to make use of those schools. So I'm just wondering, this is additionally complicated by the fact that the market doesn't always, market research doesn't always show a demand for larger apartments, but part of that reasoning could be because there aren't that many larger apartments available. So that lack of supply might be masking the lack of need. So I'm just wondering if what kind of thinking went into the mix of units, not just in the podium, but also within the towers, given the various proximities and the benefits that you are pointing out of this location.
Through you, Chair Bassett, to Councillor Bonagor, 40% of the units in this project are 2 or 3 bedroom. So I think that's a substantial supply of non-1 bedroom units, and will provide quite a bit of housing for those who seek a larger unit, whether it's a household or a family, or a family with school-age children. So we do think that this project is supplying quite a bit of housing for that need.
Can you tell us a little bit about any plans for affordability that could be linked to that?
Well, I mean, I don't know that the project is advanced to the point where the cost of the unit has been determined, but certainly this type of housing in this type of location where you could live and conduct a great many things without the use of a vehicle will be certainly more affordable than lower rise housing in other parts of Waterloo where you would need a vehicle and the cost of your housing would be substantially greater. So it is trying to serve a need in an area that lends itself to not using your vehicle. So you could move into this project and accomplish a great many things, whether it's going to work or walking, or going to work via transit, and doing a great amount of your shopping without using your vehicle, without even needing a vehicle. So we view that as another, the cost of a vehicle in terms of the cost of living, especially even before the cost of fuel went up, was a substantial cost for many people. So we sort of looked at this as an excellent location where housing that allows people to live in an area where they don't need a car is kind of what we need more of.
But with the parking provisions, you're still assuming most people will have a car?
Well, I don't want to put Max on the spot, but the bylaw.
I'm just curious, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, and I feel it's a discussion that maybe council should pursue through the official plan review. Is there policies they can introduce in the OP that encourage lower parking rates in general, and then have that filter into the bylaw? Maybe the parking rate 1 per unit plus 0.1 for visitors in a location like this isn't appropriate. So we wanted to pursue a lower parking rate, but if staff's willing to discuss with us lower than what we've requested, we'll certainly participate in that discussion.
I didn't intend to lead the discussion anyway. I'm very much curious about everything that comes across our desks here. But my final question, it touches on something I had already asked Max, and that's about just that potential for conflict between vehicles entering and exiting the location, given that it's crossing the sidewalk, and as you've explained it could make the sidewalk more, just a little bit more welcoming to have just something to walk past. But have you put some thought to how the potential for conflict might be kind of managed or minimized, or is it too early in the process to have really dug into that yet?
There are certainly tools that we can explore with ABA and with staff to slow vehicles down when they're exiting the site. So on a busy road like this, you're going to want to come to a stop certainly before you exit the site. So there's tools that we can put in place to slow the vehicle down before it exits the property. So that would mean before they come towards the sidewalk, for example. We tried to space out the accesses. So, this property already has multiple accesses, but we've tried to space them out so that there's quite a bit of pedestrian room in between the 2 accesses. But we're certainly, we'll work with staff to look at ways to ensure that vehicles aren't coming up onto the sidewalk area without clear visibility of pedestrians.
Yeah, that would be hugely appreciated, just to have that on the radar, because we do have some locations in the city where vehicles kind of drive up onto the sidewalk and then start looking to see if there's a gap in traffic. So they kind of neglect the fact that someone might be on that sidewalk as they drive onto it before they nose out into traffic. So thank you. Thank you for your patience through all of those questions. That's all from me, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, great questions. Thanks, everybody. I have a couple for you as well, Trevor, and maybe Ashley as well. Just back to this parking that you were discussing with Councillor Bonnegar and that I was asking Max, and thinking about like parking costs so much. And my understanding is parking is increasing in cost with growing construction and material costs. So what would change with this proposal if there was further parking relief? Have you talked about that?
No, we haven't, because staff hasn't certainly expressed an interest. And to be fair to Max, he's only just starting this project's review. So if that's something that staff wants to discuss with us, we'll certainly engage in that discussion. And if there's less parking required, then that does free up some space within the podium to look at other things. And obviously, the more units that don't have a parking space, it does save that unit, that resident cost for the parking space, for sure.
Well, I guess that's my other question. In developments like this, does that cost get passed along to the consumer or not? I'm also thinking about affordability here.
Absolutely, and it's a great question, and it's certainly not unique to this project, but any project that has underground or structured parking, there are substantial costs, and they are only going up associated with providing that parking. And in a condominium, for example, you would buy your unit, and if you wanted a parking space, you'd buy your parking space, and you would pay the, maybe not 100% of the cost of that parking space, but a fair percentage of it. And it, depending on where that building is and which community it's in, it can add a substantial amount to the cost of the unit. So it's certainly a factor in affordability, not just for this site, but for many sites.
Right. Yeah. Understood. Thank you. So I guess, do you have any guesses about how many, given it is right across the street from a transit stop and the amenities around there, do you have any sense, based on other projects you've worked on, how many parking spots something like this would actually need? I'm just curious.
Well, I mean, it's certainly fair to look towards the west and the uptown. So the parking requirements essentially at Moore and Laurel and west of there is 0.75 per unit. So it goes down by 25% just 150 meters away from this property. And then if you get a little bit closer into the core of the uptown, you're at 0.6 per unit. And a lot of those projects that have advanced recently have proposed parking rates 0.6, 0.7 per unit, and the buildings have been successful. So it does depend on your location, and we felt that not that we were requesting a parking rate at that level, but this property is really in many ways advantageously situated to even use the vehicle less than some of the projects in the uptown.
Yeah, okay, so I guess I was asking, have you tossed around with your team a specific number? I'm curious. I think the proposal is for 508.
We do. We certainly, yeah, we certainly do talk about parking, and we did for this project. And we had a pre-consultation meeting, and we explored a lower parking rate. And I think there has to be a willingness from both the city staff and council and the proponent of the project to explore lower parking rates. And as I said, you know, I'm certainly happy to meet with Max as early as tomorrow if Max wants to talk about less parking for this project.
You don't want to, you really don't want to give a number, eh? I'm so curious.
I don't think I could give a number off the top of my head, but I think I gave you some context for some
Yes,
other
you
rates
did.
that are not far away. Yeah.
Yes. No, for sure. Okay, last question from me, which is, yeah, I'm just thinking about affordability because, to be like quite frank, I think a place like this should be, and many other condos coming up, should be a sort of entryway into the housing market and be affordable to rent. And I've said this before, if we as a family didn't have a house that we bought many, many years ago, we couldn't afford with our incomes to buy a place in Waterloo, including any condos. And that seems, I mean, that seems frightening a little bit, and well, not frightening, but surprising, I guess. And more people are coming to terms with that, and I suppose that might be where we're headed. But wouldn't it be nice if people could imagine having moderate incomes and being able to afford a place to live and comfortably rent? And so thinking about affordability, are there other ways that you can reduce costs in this proposal that might then pass cost savings down to the consumer?
I mean, I think I might ask Ashley that question because a lot of the costs of a project either are the purchasing of the land or the construction of the building.
Yeah, I can definitely take that one. Through you, Chair Vasic. Thanks, Trevor. Yeah, in regards to the finishes of the building, of course, we did talk about curtain wall construction on the ends of the buildings facing Bridgeport as a sort of highlight component. We haven't situated that high-end finish on the opposite ends of the towers, just because we are conscious of cost savings. The tower is a typical stacked floor plate for maximum efficiencies. Within the tower plates themselves, we're also stacking the units themselves and the unit layout, so ensuring that mechanical systems, plumbing, fixtures, everything are stacked all the way up the building for maximum efficiencies, minimal structural, I guess, situations outside the norm. So we are, we have done many buildings like this, slab towers on podiums, and have a lot of experience with, working with our construction managers on cost savings strategies. So we'll definitely input that expertise into this building as well. And then in regards to the conversation earlier about reducing parking requirements, that would have a huge impact, of course, on the pro forma and the project. So if we could either reduce the number of parking spaces required per unit or shave off, a parking podium level, like these things all contribute to the bottom line. So yeah, in regards to finishes, structure, coordination with our consultants and the mechanical and plumbing systems, those are all things that we've consciously considered, because we also do picture this this project as being affordable for entry-level families as well as singles. And yeah, that's kind of a path that I'm on myself, and living in a high-rise currently as well. So I do relate.
Thanks very much, Ashley. I see that Councillor Bodley has a question as well.
Yes, appreciate the conversation, and through you, Chair Vasic, some really thoughtful discussion here. That's pretty high level in nature, so I appreciate that. My question is maybe less so. Do we have any, has any thought or consideration been given to sort of short-term deliveries, Ubers, things like that? I would be very when I see how Columbia Street, where some of the higher density buildings are located, is often abused with respect to delivery vehicles, Uber, etc., parking in cycling lanes, in some cases being complete jerks and going right up on the sidewalk. Has any thought been given to how to make it easy and or how to discourage those vehicles from disrupting traffic and pedestrian and cycling safety on the road?
It's a great question, Councillor Bodley. Each of the buildings has sort of a lay-by loading area for short-term parking and deliveries. So there's an opportunity for people to come into the site, and depending on which entrance they're delivering, whatever it is they're delivering to, they have an opportunity to pull off the drive aisle and stop and load and unload or deliver whatever it is they're delivering.
For clarification there, Trevor, thank you. Is that internal to the site? Like they're going to pull in off of Bridgeport, there's going to be a lay-by for them to pull over? That's not, okay, perfect.
Yeah.
That's it for me, but I did just want to highlight with all of the amenities there that you're also right across the street from Canadian Blood Services. Anybody who lives in the area wants to go donate blood, that'd be awesome as well too. Thanks. Back to you, Councillor Bassick. Chair Bassick.
Very good, Councillor Bodley, doing a good public service there too. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay. Sorry, I'm just going to ask the Deputy Clerk, has anybody called in? No, no one has called in. So as the Deputy Clerk informs me, there are no further speakers. This informal public meeting is now concluded. Staff will review the issues and provide further reporting to Council at a later date. Sorry, okay. Oh, sorry about that. If anyone watching would like to receive further notice of the application after the meeting, please contact the planner, Max Kerrigan, at 519-747-8522 or max.kerrigan@waterloo.ca, spelled as max.kerrigan @waterloo.ca. Staff will review the issues and provide further reporting to Council at a later date. Thanks very much, Trevor and Ashley. And Matt.
Thank you.
Okay, just a second. I'm going to get myself out here. Okay. All right. So this is a formal public meeting for zoning bylaw amendment Z2108 Fan Legend Herb LP for 310, 312, 314, and 316 Herb Street West. Any persons who want further notice of this application, including the passage of any bylaw, should contact the planner, Rita Zylock, at 519-747-8650 or Rita Zylock at waterloo.ca, spelled as RITA.SZILOCK@waterloo.ca. Will the clerk please advise Council of the method used to give notice of the meeting and the dates notice was given?
Notice was advertised in the Waterloo Chronicle on April 21st, 2022, and mailed or emailed on April 19th, 2022, to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property, to public agencies, to all persons who signed in or spoke at the informal public meeting held on September 13th, 2021, and to all persons who requested further notice.
Thank you. The planner, Rita Zylock, will now give a brief overview of the application. Thanks, Rita.
Good evening, Chair Bassick, Mayor Jaworski, members of council, members of the public, and members of staff. This is a formal public meeting for 310 through 316 Herb Street West, zoning bylaw amendment Z2108. The application was submitted by Van Legend Herb LP, represented here tonight, by Jennifer Voss of JV Planning and Development Consulting. Next slide, please. The subject site is a 4-lot consolidation located at the southern edge of the Beechwood neighborhood on the north side of Herb Street West between Amos Avenue and McDougall Road. The site is surrounded by semi-detached homes to the north, a spiritual use to the east, a triplex to the west, an assisted living facility, low-rise residential apartments, and single detached homes to the south. Next slide, please. These are conceptual perspectives of the front of the proposed development. The applicant is proposing to build a 6-story apartment building on the site containing 93 residential units with 108 bedrooms, 84 vehicle parking spaces, and 58 bike parking spaces. Next slide, please. These are conceptual perspectives of the rear of the proposed development. Next slide, please. And this is a conceptual site plan of the proposed development. The red dashed line represents the property line, and the blue dashed line represents the outline of floors 2 through 6, which cantilever over a portion of the raised parking structure behind the building. There are 2 vehicular entrances proposed, one at the east end of the site leading into the underground garage, and one at the west end of the site leading into the open air parking structure at the rear. Next slide, please. In terms of the official plan, the subject site is designated mixed-use medium-density residential, which allows for apartment buildings, a maximum density of 450 beds per hectare, and a maximum height of 20 meters. Next slide, please. In terms of the zoning bylaw, the subject site is zoned residential mixed-use 20, which permits apartment buildings, a maximum density of 450 beds per hectare, and a maximum building height of 20 meters and 6 stories. Next slide, please. The following are some of the items considered and evaluated through staff's review of the zoning bylaw amendment application. In evaluating this application, staff considered whether the proposed development was context sensitive and fit in with the surrounding neighborhood. Staff evaluated the application against the existing planning policy framework. Staff had consideration for any impacts on the low-rise residential lots to the north and the appropriateness of the proposed landscape buffer. And staff considered comments received from commenting agencies, the public, and members of council. Next slide, please. This slide contains the staff recommended zoning bylaw amendment. The site-specific regulations recommended by staff include a reduced westerly side yard setback from 3 meters to 1.6 meters, a reduced rear yard setback from 7.5 meters to 1.56 meters to accommodate the exposed parking structure wall, a reduced low-rise residential lot line setback from 10 meters to 3 meters on the east side and to 1.56 meters on the north side, a reduced northerly low-rise residential landscape buffer from an average width of 3 meters to an average width of 1.7 meters. Next slide, please. In addition, staff also is recommending that the landscape open space requirement be reduced from 30% to 25%, and that a 24.8 square meter green roof be incorporated into the building. Also, staff is recommending a reduction in the height of the first story from 4.5 meters to 2.3 meters to accommodate the interior floor-to-ceiling height of the amenity room. Lastly, staff is recommending a reduction in the residential parking rate from 1.1 spaces per unit to 0.79 spaces per unit. The visitor parking rate would remain unchanged on the site. Next slide, please. In conclusion, staff recommends that council approve zoning bylaw amendment application Z2108 for 310, 312, 314, and 316 Herb Street West in accordance with section 8 of staff report IPPW 2022-027. Next slide, please. Thank you very much for your time. That concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thanks very much, Rita. While we wait for questions to come up, I'll just say that as a reminder, if anyone is watching and would like to receive further notice of this application, you can contact Rita Zylock at 519-747-8650 or Rita Zylock at waterloo.ca, spelled as RITA.SZILOCK @waterloo.ca. If you would like to speak at the meeting, please call the clerk's office at 519-747-8705, 519-747-8705. I don't see any questions of staff coming up right now. So there's a delegation. Jennifer Voss from JV Planning and Development Consulting. Welcome, Jennifer. You've got 10 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Jaworski and members of council. My presentation expands on Ms. Zylock's presentation and provides an update on the changes to the proposal following the September 13th, 2021 informal public meeting. Next slide. As Ms. Zylock has pointed out in her presentation, the subject lands are a land assembly of 4 single detached lots that were consolidated for the purposes of redevelopment. The subject lands are designated mixed-use medium-density residential and are located within a minor corridor in the city's official plan, and are zoned residential mixed-use RMU zone. The medium-density housing types are intended to be the predominant use of land within the mixed-use medium-density residential official plan designation, and the corresponding RMU zone mimics this or coordinates this official plan designation. And it does not permit single detached dwellings as currently existing. Apartment buildings, mixed-use buildings, townhouses, and stacked townhouse buildings are the primary permitted uses within the RMU zone. Next slide. So in order to meet the intent of the official plan and to redevelop the subject lands for the intended built form, the proposal is to demolish the existing single detached dwellings and redevelop the lands for a 6-story, 93-unit residential apartment building. And again, this proposal is in keeping with the aim of the official plan designation and zoning, which is to encourage medium density mixed use, primarily residential development within a minor corridor. Next slide. At the informal public meeting, I did go through the proposal history and discuss the original proposal that was originally contemplated back in February of 2020. The original proposal contemplated a reduced street line setback of 4 meters, whereas 5 meters is required. And the other proposed site-specific regulations that are before council tonight. So the current proposal remains relatively unchanged from what was initially envisioned. The current proposal, there is no reduced street line setback proposed, and that was because staff had indicated that they would not be in a position to support a reduced street line setback. We also incorporated the green roof to provide for additional landscaping opportunities because of the reduction in the open space landscaped requirement. The reduction of a portion of the westerly side yard to accommodate a retaining wall greater than 0.6 meters in height. And the reduction of that one small portion of the first story building height to accommodate the interior amenity room, which is located above the parking garage entrance. Next slide. This slide illustrates the current site-specific regulations that are proposed. The two new ones are shown in red, which is the landscaped open space from 30% to 26.1%, which includes the 0.9% green roof, and the reduction in the first story height to allow for the location of the amenity room, which is located above the parking garage entrance. So although this is not visible from the exterior of the building, technically when you measure the height of the first story from grade to the ceiling of the amenity space, it is 2.3 meters in height, whereas the 4.5 meters is required. However, this is not visible from the exterior of the building. Next slide. So the major site constraints with respect to this site is, so as indicated at the time of the original proposal, staff advised that the reduced street line setback would not be supported. So we made the decision to keep the building setback at 5 meters, which would include the underground parking structure. The underground parking garage would not fit within the front and rear yard setback limitations. And therefore the reduced low-rise residential landscape buffer was required. The region is also requiring a 3.2 meter road widening from the frontage, which again makes it difficult to fit everything in the width of the site. And the last design constraint, which was identified in the geotechnical study, was a high water table, which requires the basement floor to be located above the water table, resulting in a portion of the rear underground garage wall being exposed along the northerly lot line. Next slide. Regardless of the site constraints that we were working with in order to facilitate the development of the 6-story building, we have, in my opinion, proposed a high quality, attractive looking building that is compatible with the adjacent, is sensitive to the existing low-rise residential development located to the north, along the north lot line. And a lot of building design highlights within the confines of the zoning were incorporated into the building. For example, the taller ground floor was designed to be easily converted to other non-residential uses in accordance with the RMU 20 zone. With the higher ground floor height, the ground floor units were designed as loft-style mezzanine units with direct access to street level, with private patios and a planter wall for enhanced privacy. We have ample indoor and outdoor bicycle parking to provide active transportation. The amenity area is an exceedance of the bylaw requirement. And because we're proposing smaller units, the amenity area has been purposely designed to provide future residents with amenity areas that will allow them to maximize, I guess, they're not going to feel kind of confined to the smaller size units, because we have purposely and incorporated co-working space and lounge, which will allow future residents to work from home in an attractive and open area space. There's a second story private terrace and green roof, which enhances the development. The exposed underground parking garage wall provides increased screening and privacy along the rear property line. Along along that wall facing the semi-detached dwellings on Karen Walk, it's going to be textured finish to simulate a stone or masonry effect on the wall facing those properties, with enhanced landscaping providing a continuous green buffer in conjunction with the softened concrete finish, which will provide a attractive green wall as part of the design of the underground as part of the design of that wall. So in conclusion, next slide, please. This is the rendering of the building, and again, in my opinion, it's going to contribute and improve the neighborhood, including the streetscape, and be a welcome, I believe, a welcome addition to this neighborhood, providing much needed smaller type apartment units to this area, to the neighborhood, in keeping with the intended planned function of the mixed use of the corridor. And that's I'm open to answer any questions council may have.
Thanks very much, Jennifer. I'm just going to wait to see here if there are any questions. Oh, okay, sure. And for council's awareness, we do have one delegation who will join us. Okay, we will now hear from the further delegation. If any person watching would like to speak at the meeting, please call 519-747-8705, 519-747-8705. All right, so to the delegation, if you'd please provide your name. Pardon?
Chair, I'm not sure if you're seeing.
Question.
Yes. So I don't know if my message is coming through.
It came through. I just missed it. I hadn't looked back up. Go ahead.
Sorry. Thank you through you, Chair. I just had a question. Just given that from between the informal meeting and now we're at the formal public meeting, there have been a few changes to the design to address some of the questions that had come up, and I was just wondering if the delegate could kind of give me their opinion of how they think that this has changed or improved what's in front of us now compared to what came earlier.
Well, there wasn't that significant changes from the informal public meeting to now. The two additional site-specific regulations that are being proposed were as a result of a site plan review as part of a revised site plan application that was submitted, I believe in December of 2021, basically to ensure that all the variances were caught and to inform this process for the zoning amendment. So the two items that were identified as being required were more technical in nature than anything. And so I think that the design itself hasn't really significantly changed drastically from what was proposed. The textured concrete form was added to the wall to soften it again and to you know, reduce the visual impact of the wall on the adjacent properties. But again, like there's going to be so much landscaping back there that the wall will be completely buffered and screened by the landscaping. And I think that was generally the only like significant change to the proposal, I guess, if you can call it that.
Okay, no, that's really helpful. I was just curious, and you know, with the not requesting a setback, you know, there might be a bit more room for just some bit more nuanced landscaping at the front, things like that. So I was just curious, and that was really helpful. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, I'll call on Matthew Garrett. So please provide your name and municipality of residence for the record, Matthew.
Hello, it's Matthew Garrett. I am a resident of the city of Waterloo. I think my name I submitted for the record already with the deputy clerk. Am I good to proceed?
Yes, and you've got 5 minutes.
Excellent. I'll be very brief. I didn't really prepare any remarks. I just wanted to note that I've appeared a couple of times to advocate for different projects in Waterloo, but this one is literally about a 2-minute walk from where I currently reside. So I figured it would be very appropriate for me to comment on something on a construction project very close to where I reside. I support it. I've been monitoring it, just seeing when the formal meeting would come through. And looking through all of the documentation, I'm glad that planning staff has recommended that these exceptions be provided. I think it is a good project that will add to the streetscape of my community. And that is all I have, unless people have questions for me.
Does anyone have a question for Matthew? I'm not seeing any pop up, but thanks so much, Matthew, for all the time you take to speak up and make the time to come to the meeting.
Thank you all for having me.
Yeah, of course. Have a good night. I'm going to ask the clerk, are there any other delegations? Nope, no more delegations. So as the clerk informs me, there are no further speakers. This formal public meeting is concluded and the application is now open to council for a motion and debate. Councillor Henry would like to move it with reading the thing. Great. Councillor Henry is going to read the motion and Councillor Bonagor is going to second. Go ahead, Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Chair Bassick. My computer has decided that the meeting event has to be over top of every other screen I have, and I can't fix it, so I'm just scrolling things away so I can read the Bill 73 language. Whereas Council has considered all written and oral submissions from the public and stakeholders, and whereas Council has considered the professional opinions of planning staff, therefore be it resolved, 1, that Council approves staff report IPPW 2022-027, and 2, that Council approves zoning bylaw amendment Z-21-08 Fan Legend Herb LP for 310, 312, 314, and 316 Herb Street West in accordance with Section 8 of Staff Report IPPW 2022-027. And with Councillor Bonagor seconding, I'm happy to I guess we can wait for voting, or I can just say right here that I'll vote in favor of the motion.
Great. Does anyone have any comments or debate? Does not look like it. So I guess we'll start with Ward 1 with the voting. Oh, it's possible Councillor Hammer had to step away for a few minutes, and it's possible she may not be back. So maybe we'll start with Ward 2.
My time to shine. Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Beath in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor, with Councillor Freeman away as well.
Councillor Bonigo in favor.
Mayor Jaworski in favor.
Councillor Bassick in favor, and that's all of us here in favor. Thanks very much, Jennifer. Okay, now I've put my, thanks so much. Now I have put my notes under here. So we are moving along to item number 12, consideration of notice of a motion given at a previous meeting. We have none. 13, notice of motion, none. 14, communications and correspondence, none. Unfinished business, none. 16, questions. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, no questions, but we are on to new business, and Mayor Jaworski has some new business. Unless, Councillor Freeman might be coming. Is she? Okay, we're just checking if Councillor Freeman's coming back. So I also have some new business. Maybe I'll go first. Mayor Jaworski, is that okay? In case she comes back?
Absolutely. I was going to clean up for Councillor Freeman when she mentions her new item. I'll go after her. Thank you.
I'm here.
Good. Oh, okay, Councillor Freeman, go ahead.
I'm just so excited to say, after 16 years of running for city council and serving as a councillor, that we finally opened an Eastside Library this past weekend. And I'm so thankful that all of my colleagues could be there. I'm sorry that I was homesick and that I couldn't be a part of it, but I'm so excited. My husband and I sponsored the bike racks that are out front, and the mayor sent me some photos of the bike racks completely full on Saturday. I just want to put a huge shout out to the library staff that brought this to fruition, the library board that supported it, the staffing that's in place, city staff, and our architectural team at the city that really provided project management and leadership to get this built. The exciting new wall that's on the front of that building, that is the heat wall and the solar wall, I should say. I want to thank Sunda and his team. They've just done an amazing job. And Lori Clark at the library and Karen Cian as chair of the board, they've really stewarded this. I can't mention this job without mentioning Cassandra Pacey, Toronto, who really found a way to fund this library and build capacity within our operating budget so that when this library came online, it was ready to operate and be staffed. And just all of you, my colleagues, for helping to make this library reality and staying the course and approving the budget. And just it takes, this is one of those things, I know it's not a child, but it's certainly one of those things where it took a village to make this happen. And I'm just so incredibly over the moon. I can't wait to see it. And I look forward to going there and taking my own pictures and making my own memories. So if I've forgotten anyone, Mayor, please jump in and take over.
Oh, there was just so much there, Councillor Freeman, and I don't think there's ever been any more bicycles at Rim Park than on Saturday. When we did the ribbon cutting, people were coming in and we said hello and we're clapping for them and thanking them for being supportive. And we did that for 20 minutes. So many people walked over through the pedestrian crossing that we have on University Ave there. So many people cycled over, people walked from the Activa area behind Rim Park there. It was just phenomenal. Hundreds of people were literally in there by 1:30, 30 minutes after opening. And I really think they're going to have a book restocking party 2 weeks from now when all these books start coming back, because people were leaving with books and everything is new in that library. It wasn't old material moved to that library, to that branch. It was all new material. And it was just so shocking how welcoming it was, what a space it is, what a great addition, a collaborative addition to all the sports that are offered there. It was really beyond my wildest dreams and my wildest expectations. Everybody was so happy who was there. And I think to the team at the City of Waterloo, to councils dating back probably 16 years, it was a job well done, and just a very exciting day. And you got to see it to believe it. Yeah, and a big shout out to Lucy, who did the mural as well. It's a great mural. By great mural, I mean 650 square feet mural inside the library. It's just a lot to see and do at the new East Side Library. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I said Karen's name wrong. It's Karen Cobiello, and she's chair of the board.
Thanks so much, you two. Yeah, that's a big community-wide celebration. I just wanted to share a few things about them a little more local in the Lincoln Heights neighborhood. They've really activated themselves in the last couple of years, especially with the neighborhood strategy. And last weekend, they had their first ever art walk, organized locally by residents. And there were probably about 20 vendors there, and the weather was pretty up and down, but tons of people came out. Lots of people were buying things, and it was really exciting. And people are talking about what it could look like next year, what could be better, what could be kept. And they also had tons of great things to say about the staff who were working that day, that they were extremely helpful and responsive. And it was a really wonderful day. And they have a few more things planned in the summer and fall, a movie night on June 4th, and they're going to watch Encanto in Rosalie Park, and then a Canada Day picnic, and then a few more things in the fall. So just really exciting to see the Lincoln Heights neighborhood with the block connectors and and organizing so many things and moderating Facebook groups in such a thoughtful way, coming together and bringing out so many people in the neighborhood. So yeah, little Ward 5, good new business. Oh, and Councillor Freeman has additional new business. Of course, it's possible. Go ahead.
Thank you. I also wanted to mention a couple of things that when I was away on vacation in April, I wanted to thank Council for the approval of the new splash pad in Eastbridge. There's great chatter happening about that. People are so excited, and again, that's been one that I know we've been working on for a really long time as a council, so it's really exciting. And in the same vein as Councillor Vasich mentioning about the Lincoln neighborhood, I wanted to shout out to the Fox Hunt neighborhood in my ward. And while I was away, they did an Easter Bunny home delivery, shall we say. The Easter Bunny went and visited some of the children in that neighborhood. And that's a neighborhood very similar to what Councillor Vasich was talking about in terms of it starting to build neighborhood events. They held some events in their park, and there's just a really great group of volunteers that are working hard to make things happen there. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Well, that's great. I don't see any other new business. So with that, we come to item 18, the enactment of bylaw. Oh, wait, hold on. I'll second the bylaws. I wouldn't want to muscle in. Okay, who wants? That's Mayor Jaworski's going to second the bylaws. Anyone want to jump in? Oh, and Councillor Freeman's going to move. Oh, she does want to muscle her way in. Great. I love to see this. Okay, and we'll start. I don't think Councillor Henmer's back, so we'll start with Ward 2. Sorry, Royce. Sorry, Councillor Bodley.
Councillor Bodley foiled again, votes in favor.
Councillor Beath in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
Mayor Jaworski in favor.
Councillor Vasich in favor. That's all of us who are here. And now a mover and a seconder for adjournment. Councillor Bodley makes his way in. Yeah, boom. Way to go. Who's seconding? Mayor Jaworski didn't even want to say second. Yep. All right, fine. Moved by Councillor Bodley, seconded. Well done. Thank you, seconded. All right, starting with Ward 2.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
Thank you, Chair Vasic. I'm in favor.
Me too, in favor. And we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night, all.